Ferrari just set the fastest lap of Bahrain testing, and the new data behind it is even more shocking. We are talking about a 1 minute 34.273 that still stands as the benchmark. But here's the part nobody expected. The same data that proves the SF26 might be the fastest car over one lap also reveals a hidden weakness that could cost them 0.3 per lap when it matters most. And while Ferrari looks explosive, two teams are already in serious trouble. One is losing up to 15 km per hour on the straights. The other is struggling just to complete stable long runs. If the numbers coming out of Bahrain are accurate, this season could already be splitting into contenders and crisis teams. Stay with me, because what the data really shows about Ferrari's insane pace changes the entire picture heading into week 2. Let's break down why that lap caused so much tension inside the paddock. Because it was not just fast. It was controlled. When Leclerc put in that 1 minute 34.273, the car did not look nervous. It did not look on the edge. It looked planted. And when engineers overlaid the GPS traces, something became very clear. Through medium and high-speed corners, the SF26 is generating extraordinary aerodynamic load. In certain sections, it is carrying more mid-corner speed than Red Bull. That is not hype. That is data. The front end looks sharp on turn-in. The rear rotates aggressively, especially in slower corners. And the mechanical traction on exit is arguably the best on the grid right now. On low fuel, everything clicks. That is why some engineers privately admit Ferrari might currently have the strongest one-lap package in Bahrain. But here is where the story shifts. Because that performance exists inside a very narrow operating window. The car is extremely sensitive to setup changes, extremely sensitive to crosswind, and extremely sensitive to temperature variation. Which brings us back to the thermal problem. The new data suggests the 2026 Ferrari power unit is rejecting significantly more heat than predicted, particularly around the inverter and battery systems. That excess heat forces Ferrari to open up cooling outlets in the bodywork. And every time those openings increase, drag increases. The estimate circulating in the paddock is roughly 0.3 of a second per lap lost when the cooling configuration is fully opened. 0.3. That completely reshuffles the front row. So imagine the dilemma. In qualifying trim, tight bodywork, maximum aero efficiency, the car looks sensational. Over a race distance, in real heat, with full fuel loads, that same configuration becomes risky. Push too hard. Temperature rises. Reliability alarms appear. And that is exactly what happened when Hamilton's car stopped late in the week. Which is why week 2 is so critical. Ferrari is expected to bring a redesigned engine cover. More conservative. More cooling capacity. But less aerodynamic efficiency. If that update works, Ferrari becomes balanced. Fast and reliable. If it does not, the SF26 becomes something else. A car that can take pole, but cannot finish comfortably. And championships are not won on Saturday alone. Now add another layer. There is a genuine setup divergence between Hamilton and Leclerc. Hamilton reportedly wants changes to rear suspension geometry because the active aero system introduces unpredictable balance shifts under braking. Leclerc is comfortable with that instability. He uses it to rotate the car aggressively. So Ferrari is managing heat. Managing aero balance. Managing two different driving philosophies. All at once. And that is before we even look at the rest of the grid. Because while Ferrari is flirting with brilliance, two teams are not flirting with anything. They are fighting survival. Let's start with Aston Martin. Because while Ferrari is balancing on the edge of brilliance, Aston is staring at something far more uncomfortable. A performance gap that should not exist. Early comments suggested a 4-second deficit to the leaders. Even if that number is exaggerated, more realistic analysis still places them between 1.5 to 2 seconds off the pace. In a brand new regulation era, that is alarming. The AMR26 was built around an extreme size zero concept, tightly packaged around the Honda power unit. On paper, it looked aggressive, innovative, compact. On track, it looks suffocated. The issue is not just cooling. It is electrical deployment. Reports suggest the Honda unit is suffering from energy clipping halfway down the long straights of Sakhir. The battery and energy recovery system cannot sustain full deployment under the new 2026 rules. So halfway through the straight, the boost fades. And when that happens, the car loses up to 15 km per hour compared to Red Bull. 15 km per hour is not a detail. It is a vulnerability. Defending becomes impossible. Overtaking becomes inevitable. And this is not something you fix with minor setup changes. Engineers have reportedly flown in emergency support from Japan with software updates for week 2. But if the limitation is hardware-based, battery capacity or recovery efficiency, then there is no quick solution. And the mood reflects that reality. Alonso is said to be deeply frustrated, because this was supposed to be a leap-forward year. Instead, they are fighting to simply run clean stints. Now shift to Cadillac. Their entry into Formula One was supposed to signal ambition, momentum, a new American chapter in the sport. But testing is unforgiving, and early signs suggest they are struggling with basic integration, cooling inconsistencies, gearbox stress under torque load, unstable aerodynamic balance in long runs. The car looks unpredictable, and unpredictability is dangerous in preseason, because testing is about correlation. You run laps, you compare data, you refine the model. If you cannot run consistently, you cannot build understanding. And without understanding, development stalls. While Ferrari debates drag versus temperature, and Aston debates survival versus redesign, Cadillac is still trying to establish a baseline. That is not where you want to be before race 1. Because once the season begins, upgrades cost time. Confidence drops quickly, and momentum becomes hard to recover. Meanwhile, other teams are watching quietly. Red Bull appears calm, even rumored to be holding back performance until the final days. McLaren has been methodical, logging laps without drama. And sometimes the quietest team in testing is the most dangerous when qualifying begins. So here is the bigger picture. Ferrari may have shocked everyone with insane one-lap speed, but they are walking a thermal tightrope. Aston Martin is facing a power delivery crisis. Cadillac is wrestling with integration. And Week 2 in Bahrain will not hide anything. Full race simulations. True qualifying runs. Real fuel loads. If Ferrari survives the heat, the championship narrative changes instantly. If Aston cannot fix the clipping, their season begins under pressure. If Cadillac cannot stabilize, they start on the back foot. Testing Week 1 gave us headlines. Week 2 will give us answers. And those answers may completely reshape how we see the grid before the lights ever go out. Now here is where everything becomes even more intense. Because Week 2 is not just about lap times. It is about exposure. In Week 1, teams can hide. They can run high fuel loads. They can mask engine modes. They can avoid showing true qualifying pace. But in Week 2, the programs change. Race simulations begin. Full fuel runs under peak afternoon heat. Qualifying simulations with minimal fuel and aggressive engine mapping. There is nowhere to hide. For Ferrari, this is the ultimate stress test. If they attempt a full race distance with the revised cooling package and complete it without lifting the bodywork, without reducing power, without temperature alarms, the message will be undeniable. They are not just fast. They are sustainable. And sustainable speed wins championships. But if mid-run they are forced to open additional cooling, if power must be dialed back to protect the battery, if rear tire degradation spikes because torque delivery remains too aggressive, then the narrative shifts instantly. The SF26 becomes a Saturday star, not a Sunday champion. And that is a dangerous label. Now think about Aston Martin under the same spotlight. If the electrical clipping remains visible in Week 2, rivals will analyze every straight-line trace. They will see exactly where deployment fades. They will plan overtakes around it. And once that weakness becomes predictable, it becomes permanent. Because in Formula One, data spreads quickly. And once competitors understand your vulnerability, they exploit it relentlessly. For Cadillac, Week 2 is about proof of competence. Not about beating Ferrari. Not about chasing Red Bull. About showing they can run long programs without mechanical drama. Because reliability is credibility. And credibility buys time. Without it, pressure builds immediately. Inside the factory. Inside the boardroom. Inside the cockpit. Meanwhile, Red Bull and McLaren continue quietly. Red Bull rumored to be holding performance in reserve. McLaren logging consistent mileage without headline drama. And sometimes, the teams that shout the least in testing deliver the most in Melbourne. So here is the tension heading into Week 2. Ferrari has shown insane raw pace. Aston Martin has shown alarming weakness. Cadillac has shown instability. But raw pace means nothing without confirmation. And weakness can sometimes hide temporary solutions. The real hierarchy will only become visible when the cars run flat out, for long distances, in full heat, with no excuses. Because Bahrain testing is not about headlines. It is about foundations. Who built a car that works in theory? And who built a car that works in reality? If Ferrari's new data holds under race conditions, the championship fight begins immediately. If it collapses under temperature stress, everything resets. And if Aston or Cadillac cannot respond quickly, the gap to the front will grow before the first race even starts. Week 1 gave us shock. Week 2 will give us truth. And truth in Formula One is rarely gentle. And here is the part that makes this moment feel even bigger. Because what happens in week 2 will not just shape the opening race. It will shape development direction for the next 6 months. If Ferrari proves the SF26 can handle race distance heat without sacrificing pace, the confidence inside Maranello will explode. Upgrades will be aggressive. Concept evolution will stay bold. They will double down on what makes the car special. High mid-corner load. Sharp front end. Explosive traction. And when Ferrari smells opportunity, they push harder than almost anyone. But if week 2 exposes that the thermal compromise is structural, not temporary, then development becomes conservative. Cooling first. Performance second. And that subtle shift changes everything. Because in a cost cap era, you cannot chase 2 philosophies at once. Now look at Aston Martin from that same angle. If they solve the clipping with software, even partially, hope returns. A half-second gain through deployment alone would change their entire outlook. Momentum would stabilize. Driver confidence would recover. But if the problem is hardware-based, if the battery capacity or energy recovery architecture is fundamentally limited, then no patch can mask it. And that means a long season of defending instead of attacking, which slowly drains morale. For Cadillac, the challenge is different. They are not expected to fight for podiums immediately, but they are expected to look competent, stable, methodical. If week 2 shows clean, uninterrupted long runs, even without headline pace, the narrative becomes progress. Foundation building. Long-term project. But if mechanical issues continue, if gearbox stress or cooling instability keeps interrupting programs, the label changes. Unprepared. And in Formula One, labels stick. Now zoom out. Red Bull still looks composed. McLaren still looks quietly confident. Mercedes still has political questions hovering in the background. And Ferrari stands at the center of it all. The fastest one-lap car so far. The narrowest operating window. The boldest risk. This is what makes the new data so shocking. It shows potential dominance and potential vulnerability at the same time. And that combination is what defines early season drama. Because championships are rarely decided by who is fastest in testing. They are decided by who understands their car the quickest, who adapts fastest when problems appear, who turns weakness into evolution before rivals catch up. So as week 2 begins, every lap matters more than it seems. Every long run reveals thermal stability. Every straight reveals electrical consistency. Every qualifying simulation reveals true hierarchy. And when Bahrain ends, the grid will not just know who is quick. They will know who is ready. Ferrari has shown insane pace. Aston Martin has shown alarming signs. Cadillac has shown instability. But potential is not proof. And week 2 is where potential either becomes reality or disappears under pressure.